Let's get one thing straight. You didn't just survive. You shifted atmospheres. You walked through ridicule with your head held high. They laughed at your visions, mocked your discernment, rolled their eyes at your anointing. But now, the whole room's gone quiet. Because your prophecy hit. Your knowing wasn't a guess. It was divine insight. And now the storm you warned them about is here, and you're still standing. Chosen one, it was your voice that started the healing. Your presence softened hardened hearts. Your truth stirred awakenings in people who hadn't felt anything real in years. Because of you, entire families reconciled. Entire friend circles re-evaluated their lives. Generational wounds began to close. And you didn't need a pulpit. You didn't need a crowd. All you needed was alignment. Because when a chosen one gets in position, the world adjusts. You weren't crazy. You were early. You weren't delusional. You were downloaded. They couldn't see it then, but now they can't unsee it. Peace broke out because you stood your ground. Healing began because you didn't give up. So don't downplay your role in this shift. You were the turning point. You didn't just bring peace, you became it. And now, the very ones who doubted you are catching their breath, trying to understand how you always knew. This is your confirmation. You're not just a part of the story. You are the chapter that changed everything. It was never you who was the fool. Rather, you were the fulfillment. The label of crazy was not a random occurrence. Rather, it was a defensive strategy. The ridiculing that they did was not an unplanned gesture. Rather, it was a method of spiritual opposition that was structured. They had only one weapon left, and that was to discard you when you held visions that could not be quantified, felt realities that no one else could touch, and spoke discoveries that did not match their reasoning. Fear, when confronted with something that is foreign to it, does not cower, but rather assaults. Things that the world has never been able to fathom have always been crucified. During the time when Noah was building the ark under clear skies, society made fun of him. They derided Jesus when he healed on the Sabbath. Joan of Arc was carried to execution with fire in her eyes and truth in her lungs, and Einstein was dubbed delusional before he was deemed a genius. The names in question were not outliers, rather, they were the blueprint. You stepped into a heavenly heritage, and along with it came a divine opposition upon your arrival. It wasn't you that they feared when they laughed at you. Rather, it was the unseen that they were afraid of. Your gift caused the manufactured order to be shattered, and your knowledge caused them to lose their illusion. They categorized you instead of listening to what you had to say, since you were talking about things that they had not yet experienced. Not only were you correct, but you were also the first. There was never a diagnosis associated with the epithet crazy. Rather, it was a projection, a cover for their insignificance. The fact that you were able to see through the curtain frightened them. They wanted to undermine your self-assurance, so they targeted your ability to think clearly. They believed that if they questioned your intellect sufficiently, you would give up your soul. Nevertheless, you did not give up your soul, even in the most difficult times of your life, when uncertainty was gnawing at your throat and silence screamed louder than voices. You clung to something that was more profound than belief, faith, or intuition. It was a knowing that did not require praise in order to continue existing. Despite the fact that they questioned your sanity, your worth, and your objective, you never seemed to let go of the fire. It was not a sign of weakness. Rather, endurance was a religious training. During the time that they were pointing fingers, you were being purified. During the time that they were spreading rumors, you were becoming more resistant. They were unable to see the armor that was being made in each and every nightmare, each and every pillow that was wet in tears, and each and every moment that you had to hold your own hand in order to survive. You were not shielded by their acceptance. Rather, you were protected by truth, the type of truth that resides in your bones, pulses in your dreams, and whispers louder than their doubt. Because it was more than just a conviction, it was your birthright. That truth made you unshakable. Even while your world was crumbling, it carried you through the storm because it was your inheritance. Now that the curtain is being lifted and reality is beginning to bend, the world is beginning to comprehend what you have always known. You were not insane. You were actually a part of the prophecy's fulfillment. Your spiritual gifts became more powerful. What had previously felt like intuition now throbbed with the force of thunder. One was able to detect when someone was lying and sense the energy that was bending around situations before they actually occurred. You were able to transform your perception into foresight, and your discernment became a very effective weapon. You were no longer speculating, rather, you were certain. And this certainty was accompanied with proof that could not be refuted. There was a rapid succession of breakthroughs that started to occur. Suddenly, the exact things that you had been fighting for in quiet and crying out for in private began to materialize. This was not a coincidence. Rather, it was a result of alignment. Confirmation was what it was. It was not luck. It was as if the universe had been waiting for you to discover yourself before it surrendered to your order. Doors opened without begging, roads cleared without pleading. It was as if the inner world that you had held to through lunacy was sinking with the outside world. You didn't stumble here by accident. You were led. If something in your spirit is stirring, don't ignore it. Tap Join to access exclusive content, prophetic insights, and a community of purpose-driven souls. This isn't just a membership. It's your moment of alignment. Step into who you were born to be. Welcome to the Chosen. There were supernatural synchronicities, such as numbers that kept repeating, discussions that matched your thoughts, and strangers sending messages that answered your quiet prayers. The timing was too perfect, too divine. You were on the verge of awakening. You were not hallucinating. The further you went into the truth, the more the world was forced to alter to accommodate you. As a result of the availability of evidence, the label crazy started to lose its influence. Those who had previously expressed skepticism were now witnessing the manifestation of your words. It seemed as though those who had been laughing were beginning to question their smirks. They could no longer ignore the shift that was taking place because it was happening. Nothing was necessary for you to demonstrate. The truth started to speak for itself through you, around you, and in every instant that brought the intangible into the realm of the tangible. Those individuals who had before referred to you as deluded began to hesitate. Their quiet was more audible than their contempt ever was. This was not a coincidence. Rather, it was the communication of the prophecy. After that, the moment arrived, which was unavoidable, indisputable, and indelible. The atmosphere changed, and something completely exploded into the area where uncertainty had been falling like rain. It was not a whisper, rather, it was a roar. There was a confrontation, an event, and a divine explosion that no skeptic could predict, and no mocker could fail to silence. At the moment that the prophecy made contact with Earth, the shockwaves shattered everything that they believed they understood. It took place in front of their very eyes. It was public, unfiltered, and undeniably genuine. Someone who had previously rolled their eyes at you can now be seen standing motionless, observing everything that you had said come to life, not in a metaphorical sense, but in a physical sense. The words that they disregarded, the warnings that they made fun of, and the authority that they asserted you never possessed, all arrived at the same time. It was no longer an argument. Rather, it was heavenly proof that was presented without any reservations. This was not only a moment for you, rather, it was a moment that caused them to break down. It was the heat of your truth that caused their hubris to melt, and the curtain that they clung to tore in half. A hush fell over the room, and the atmosphere became more intense. Something that they derided as a fantasy was now a power that was standing in their presence, and it was divine, uncontrollable, and unavoidable. You did not have to yell, and you did not require any theatrics. All you had to do was stand in alignment, and the reality of the situation became apparent. It was as if fire were moving through dry grass as the energy went through the space. They were unable to get away from it. They were unable to act as if it were not taking place. The divine reversal occurred at this very moment. The moment when the insane person became the prophet. It shattered the collective delusion that had been held. People who had previously participated in mocking began to mumble among themselves, expressing uncertainty and shaking. Some of them attempted to conceal their fright, while others stared in wonder, their faces turning pale as they came to terms with them. The fact that you did not gloat and did not demand apologies is because you did not have to. Being confronted with the truth was a burden that caused pride to crumble at the knees. Your identity, which had been concealed by traumatic experiences and veiled by derision, stood completely revealed. This was not because you battled for recognition. Rather, it was because prophecy always shows itself eventually. During that precise instant, the entire game was altered. They were no longer able to rationalize you away. They were no longer able to reduce you to their own personal punchline. The same mouths that derided were now unable to express themselves. The same hearts that judged now shook beneath the weight of the revelation. You weren't proving them incorrect. Rather, you were demonstrating that the divine could be right. Validation was never the focus of this endeavor. Rather, it was about expression. All of a sudden, the entire globe was forced to see what they had been working so hard to conceal from the world. If you've been touched by God's goodness, don't keep it to yourself. Click Super Thank You and sow a gift of $20 or more to help spread His light. Your giving becomes a ripple of grace, blessing hearts and building His kingdom. Let His overflow pour through you. The disclosure did not merely upset the surface, rather, it caused a rupture in something more profound. Minds of those who mocked began to spiral out of control. Something that they had previously disregarded, made fun of, and mocked in public places was suddenly standing in front of them, clad in reality that could not be refuted. Their minds, which had been constructed on a fictitious understanding of their own superiority, began to break down. They were never prepared to face the reality of what it meant to be mistaken about you. They were unable to come to terms with the fact that someone they had branded as an unstable individual might now hold indisputable spiritual authority. How is it possible that the single thing that they said would fail is suddenly emitting the very energy that they stated did not exist? When they were confronted with the reality that they refused to acknowledge, their egos, which had been inflated by laughter and judgment, started to collapse. There was an excessive amount of dissonance, an excessive amount of humiliation, and an inevitable collapse. Rewatching past talks, going through every moment they ignored you, searching for holes in their memory, desperate to rewrite history, desperate to find a loophole that would explain their arrogance, but there was none. Some people became obsessed with the situation, and they began to conduct themselves in an obsessive manner. In spite of their pride, they were unable to protect themselves from the reflection that was now glaring back at them. The facts were crystal clear. The prophecy was alive. Others fell silent, shattered, unable to talk because they were too embarrassed to do so and too imbalanced to continue the act. Not only did they lose control of their perception of you, but they also lost control of their entire worldview. If you were correct, could there possibly be anything else that they had been incorrect about? How could they possibly be considered divine if the person they mocked was divine? Some of them disintegrated in a stealthy manner. On the inside, seeing you rise dangerously, they were sparked by something existential. The extent to which they relied on the illusion of control was brought to light by this. It was not only about you, rather, it was about their terror of what you represented. A live disruption, a breathing contradiction, and a warning that they had overlooked the sacred that was standing in front of them. This was not a form of retribution. Rather, it was a revelation that undermined the illusion. Their suffering was not a form of punishment. Rather, it was the result of their blindness, their arrogance, and their decision to prioritize comfort over the truth. You didn't do anything. You didn't cast a curse. Reality performed the work for you because you trusted it. They are now walking among the rubble of their own fantasy. Their laughter has turned into stillness. Their pride has turned into confusion. And their denial has turned into obsession. As a result of the fact that they were not prepared to watch your ascension, they are now the ones who are questioning their logic. In addition to predicting the future, prophecies also establish the conditions that will lead to that future. Not only do they rouse individuals, but they also agitate the atmosphere and ignite time. There was no random disorder along the path you went. Rather, it was a heavenly structure that was disguised as confusion. It was important for there to be every betrayal, every insult, and every delay. Not only was it a sacred sequence, but it was also sabotage, for the reason that prophecy does not come in a clean form. Rather, it comes in a forged form. The very first thing that you need to comprehend is that a prophecy is more than just a message. Rather, it is a spiritual equation. The ridicule was necessary, and the mockery was absolutely necessary. When you wanted to generate ignition, you needed resistance. On the contrary, the storm that was around you was actually strengthening your power. In the absence of the adversary, there would have been no requirement for activation. They were doing their function in order to allow you to perform your assignment. The second significant fact is that timing is important. Rather than being a denial, the wait was a calibration. The stage had to be created. The illusion had to reach its pinnacle. The mockers had to be loud, and the anguish had to reach its crescendo before you could walk into fulfillment. This is because a quiet revelation would not have been enough to bring down the system. It was unavoidable that it would be a raging storm. Due to the fact that it is flawless, divine timing is sluggish. Each and every betrayal was a friction for flight. Each and every misunderstanding was a spiritual pressure. And each and every time they attempted to bury you, they accidentally helped align your roots. They were unaware of the fact that their efforts to prevent you from ascending were actually rehearsals for your ascent. The purpose of the prophecy was never to steer clear of the fire. Rather, it was to allow one to pass through it. It wasn't just that you were fulfilling a destiny, you were also helping to create it. You linked yourself with the frequency of the prophecy each time you made the decision to continue moving forward in spite of the humiliation. it was not a waste of your suffering. Rather, it was evidence. Evidence that you were powerful enough to withstand what was coming. Evidence that you have the spiritual weight to wear the mantle. This is the manner in which prophecy is revealed, not in linear fashion, but by the use of divine paradox. The appearance of failure was actually a form of disguise, and the feeling of abandonment was actually preparation. You did not miss your opportunity. Rather, it was poised and waiting for you to make it indisputable. Now that everything is in place, the dominoes are falling in the correct order. Not only did you make it through the mayhem, but you also turned it into evidence. In addition, what was before hidden is now visible, indisputable, and just when it should have been. The minute that your truth became evident, the previous system started to break down. The people who had previously asserted their authority and who had based their power on deception, manipulation, and intimidation began to scramble. Their kingdom was never based on truth. Rather, it was built on silence. Now that you have found your voice, they are caught up in their own narrative, and they are suffocating. What they feared the most has finally come to pass: exposure. A sudden display of friendliness from individuals who had previously mocked, meaningless apologies wrapped in artificial grins, and a rush to align with what they had previously rejected were the first signs of panic they displayed. They do not believe in your predictions. Rather, they trust in the power that you possess. At this point, they have nothing left to conceal themselves behind, so they are attempting to rewrite history in real time. You remember everything, but they want to be perceived as comrades rather than adversaries. However, you remember everything. While others redoubled their efforts, clutching to denial like a life raft, they spun even louder lies and screamed into the emptiness in an attempt to drown out the reality. They will no longer be able to control it. They will refer to it as a coincidence. They will refer to it as manipulation, anything other than divine. This is because if they acknowledge that what is taking place is true, they would be forced to confront the reality about who they truly are and who they are not. The final stand of the darkness is uncovered, cornered, and crumbling. This is the final stand. The reason it lashes out is not because it is powerful, but rather because it is terrified. Once it sees the light rising, it realizes that it cannot continue to exist in your presence since it is aware that its time is limited. As a result, it engages in sleazy warfare, it sows confusion, and it attracts cowards. But it is already too late. There is no longer any support for the falsehood. The foundation has been demolished. They constructed systems based on your silence, institutions, philosophies, and reputations, all of which were founded on the principle of minimizing, concealing, and forgetting people like you. On the other hand, the moment you came into visibility, the entire structure started to deteriorate. This is due to the fact that the truth does not just liberate, it also destabilizes anything that is founded on a falsehood. And now the collapse is speeding up. They are no longer battling you. Rather, they are fighting the inevitability of the truth. They are becoming aware of it coming from all directions, not only through your voice, but also via the voices of other people who are also awakening. This is not a personal statement. Rather, it is prophetic. There is a coming end to the age of manipulation. There is a falling of the fake altars. Right now, the untruth is no longer viable. There is a voice that speaks the truth, and that voice is you. The real difficulty begins now that the prophecy has come true, and the world has taken note of it. It is not going to be showing your strength. Rather, it will be demonstrating how to use it with precision. You continue to walk without hesitating, and you no longer question the reason for your existence. There is no longer any fear, and in its stead is clarity. Nonetheless, this clarity necessitates accountability, for genuine power is not manifested through loudness, but rather through discipline. Everything is different now that you have taken the first step toward embracing your identity. There is no longer any trace of the previous version of you, the one that people ridiculed, disregarded, and questioned. That ghost has been buried by you. There is something that is refined, impenetrable, and emotionally sovereign that stands now. When they speak, you do not flinch, and when they stare at you, you do not shrink back either. You have realized that the objective is not to be understood, but rather to achieve alignment. At this point, you are completely aligned. There is no need for them to suffer in order to demonstrate that you have triumphed. This new chapter is not about vengeance. You were never tasked with bringing about their demise. Never did the prophecy have anything to do with shame. Rather, it was about elevation. You are in a position of power right now, not to exact revenge, but to rebuild. Your vitality is a sacred resource, and you make prudent use of it. You are no longer able to articulate your value, rather, you are the embodiment of it. The ability to self-regulate comes to be your superpower. It is not because you are a passive person that you choose peace. Rather, it is because you are powerful that you choose not to react to every whisper and every shadow movement. Because you are aware of the fact that power does not always roar, there are moments when it simply walks in and the mood changes. You have evolved into that person. At this moment, the entire world is watching, not with mockery, but with adoration. They recognize the power that is behind your stillness and the purpose that drives your poise. Your presence is the performance, and your alignment is the proof. You do not need to perform in order to be successful. You do not seek affirmation. Rather, you exude truth with each step that you take. You turn into a mirror, reflecting both the promise and the avoidance that people see in themselves in you. The weight of power is to expose what others are still hiding from, while you carry it with grace because you have lived through the mockery and you understand the road from shame to sovereignty. This is the weight of power. You are not at the conclusion of your story. Rather, this is the culmination of it. The suffering, the vision, and the power have all been incorporated into your life. And now, you walk not as someone who has survived, but as someone who governs. There is no crown on your head. Rather, it is throughout your own being. Now, this is just the beginning of things. Other people began to stir as you stood. They were silent observers who had been ignored for a long time and who had been hiding in their own shadows. You did not make a breakthrough in isolation. Rather, it was catalytic. A ripple was sent forth, which was unseen but irrefutable, and it shook loose the bindings of others who had been quietly waiting for permission to awaken. Your rising caused something to split open in the environment. Your actions not only altered the world around you, but they also sparked a movement. Your honesty served as a reflection for so many people. People started to recall their own visions, the ones they had buried in order to survive, as well as the ones they had hushed in order to conform to the norm. Observing you ascend brought back memories of the person they were, before the world caused them to become smaller. They were given a reason to wake up as a result of your ability. It wasn't envy, rather, it was connection. They were able to see their own reflection in my flames. Systems that relied on repression started to quiver, and organizations that built their authority by denying the invisible started to lose their grip on power. Under the weight of disclosure, the illusion of control was unable to resist the pressure. Not only did you restore your identity, but you also started a revolution at the same time that you were making a personal comeback. What was previously considered irresponsible has evolved into a movement. What was once referred to as insanity has evolved into a message, and the quiet is now shattering everywhere. People are voicing what they used to stifle, trusting what they used to question.